This is HOA clapback. I did not raise my voice. I raised my evidence packet. I am a paramedic in Burlington, Vermont, and I work nights, which means I sleep during the day, and I park my car in the same guest spot for stretches that apparently make me look like a criminal to the Aspen Hollow Parking Compliance Association. Susan Kelly is standing in front of my driver door right now, waving a handheld plate scanner at my windshield like it is a weapon, and she is telling me my vehicle has been flagged as abandoned because it did not move for 24 hours. I say, Susan, I work 12-hour shifts. I just got home 6 hours ago, and this is a guest spot, not assigned parking. She taps the scanner again and says, you can be mad or you can be compliant. The beep is loud and angry, and she smirks like she just scored a point. I ask her what compliance even means in this context, and she says the HOA revised the parking policy last month, and any vehicle parked longer than 18 hours without a current guest decal is subject to immediate towing. I tell her I never got a notice about any revision, and she says ignorance is not an excuse, and that I should check my mailbox more often. I point out that I live here. I am not a guest, and my assigned spot is being repaved this week, which is why I am in the guest lot to begin with. She shrugs and says the guest lot is for guests, and if I want an exception, I need to file a waiver with the compliance office, which is only open Tuesdays and Thursdays from 10 to noon, and today is Friday. I tell Susan I have a scheduled closing appointment in 2 weeks for a refinance, and any lien or tow record on my property could blow the whole thing up, so I need her to back off until I can get the waiver filed. She says that sounds like a personal problem, and the HOA has a duty to enforce the rules uniformly. I ask her who else got flagged today, and she does not answer, just taps her scanner again and walks away. 10 minutes later, a tow truck rolls into the lot with amber lights flashing, and the driver gets out holding a clipboard. I run outside in my socks and ask him what the call was, and he says the HOA Liaison reported an abandoned vehicle and provided authorization. I tell him the car is not abandoned. I am the owner. I live here, and this is retaliation. He looks uncomfortable and says he is just doing his job, but he admits the HOA has been calling him a lot lately for jobs that feel sketchy. I ask him if he can hold off until I get documentation, and he says he cannot ignore a signed authorization slip, but he will give me 15 minutes to talk to the office. I thank him and sprint back inside to grab my phone, my lease, and my work schedule printout. The HOA office is a converted garage at the front of the subdivision, with a buzzer system and a plastic sign that says Aspen Hollow Parking Compliance Association in vinyl letters. I buzz 3 times before someone picks up, and a voice says the office is closed on Fridays. I say this is an emergency. My car is about to be towed, and I need to speak to someone immediately. The voice says I can leave a message and someone will return my call within 3 business days. I say I do not have 3 business days. I have 10 minutes, and Susan Kelly is the one who called the tow, so maybe she should explain why she is targeting me specifically. The voice goes quiet for a second, then says Susan is the neighborhood watch liaison and she does not need to explain enforcement actions to residents under review. I ask what under review means, and the line clicks off. I get back to the parking lot and the tow driver is hooking up my front wheels. I show him my lease and my work badge and tell him this is harassment, not a legitimate tow. He unhooks the chain and says he believes me, but he cannot refuse the authorization without risking his contract. I ask him how many times the HOA has called him this month, and he says probably 15, and half of them felt wrong. I take a picture of his truck, his plate, and the authorization slip he is holding, which has no readable text but clearly shows Susan's signature at the bottom. He says if I want to fight this, I should show up to the next board meeting with evidence, because the HOA has been bleeding residents with late fees and tow charges that do not match the actual policy. I thank him and he drives off, leaving my car in place for now. That night I pull up the HOA group chat on my phone, and it is a mess of screenshots and complaints about parking enforcement, guest decals, fire lane violations, and late fees that appeared out of nowhere. Someone posted a photo of a tire clamp on their wheel with a note that said they were charged $200 to get it removed, even though they had a valid permit. Another person said their guest was towed during a family birthday party, and the tow yard wanted $350 cash only. I scroll back 2 months and find a thread where Susan is coordinating with the board president about a targeted enforcement wave to clean up repeat offenders. My name is on the list with a note that says resistant to compliance. I screenshot everything and send it to my email. Then I start looking for an attorney who handles HOA disputes. The next morning I get a notice taped to my door that says I owe a $50 administrative fee for non-compliance with parking policy. I call the office again and get the same recorded message. I text my neighbor across the hall and ask if she got any notices, and she says no. But she heard Susan has been walking the lot every morning with her scanner looking for violations. I ask if she knows why Susan is fixating on me, and she says Susan got into an argument with a paramedic last year over noise from an ambulance idling in the guest lot, and ever since then she has had it out for anyone in emergency services. I realize this is not about parking at all. This is personal. I drive to the tow yard to ask about the authorization slips, and the clerk at the desk says they keep copies for 30 days and then shred them. I ask if I can see the ones for this subdivision, and he says that is proprietary information unless I have a subpoena. I tell him I am not trying to sue him. I am trying to prove the HOA is abusing the tow contract, and if he cooperates now, it might save him a headache later. He thinks about it and says he cannot show me the slips, but he can confirm that Aspen Hollow has called for 23 tows in the last 60 days, which is double the rate of any other client. I thank him and leave. The first escalation happens the following Monday when I try to use my gate access card, and the reader beeps red. I drive up to the call box and press the button, and the voice says my account has been suspended pending resolution of outstanding compliance issues. I ask what issues, and the voice says I need to contact the office during business hours. I tell them I need to get to work, I have a shift starting in 40 minutes, and if I am late I am on probation at a new job, and I cannot afford to miss a single shift. The voice says that is not the gate operator's problem, and I should have thought about that before ignoring HOA policies. The gate stays closed. I have to back out and drive around to the side entrance, which adds 15 minutes, and I am late anyway. My supervisor pulls me aside and says this is my second late arrival in 3 weeks, and one more will trigger a formal review. That same week, I file a records request with the HOA for all parking policy updates, board meeting minutes, and tow authorizations from the last 6 months. The response comes back in an email that says I can receive copies for 25 cents per page, payable in advance, with a minimum processing time of 30 business days. I reply and say that is absurd. The records are digital, and state law requires a response within 10 business days. The email bounces. I call the office and get the same recorded message. I leave a voicemail saying I am prepared to file a complaint with the state attorney general if they continue to stonewall me, and I copy my attorney on the email thread. Susan shows up at my door that night with a clipboard and says she is conducting a noise inspection. I ask her what that means, and she says the board received a complaint about loud music and disruptive behavior coming from my unit. I tell her I work nights, I am barely home, and I do not even own a stereo. She says the complaint is anonymous and the board takes all complaints seriously. I ask to see the complaint, and she says that is confidential. I tell her this is harassment, and she says, "You can be mad, or you can be compliant." Then she walks away. I start recording every interaction with my phone. I install a dash cam in my car. I print out the group chat screenshots and organize them by date, highlighting every mention of targeted enforcement. I reach out to the tow driver again, and he agrees to meet me at a gas station lot at the edge of the subdivision. He brings a folder with copies of authorization slips, and he says he is tired of being used to shake down residents. He points to one slip from 3 weeks ago where Susan called for a tow on a car that was legally parked in a visitor spot with a valid guest pass on the dashboard, and the owner had to pay $275 to get it back. He says he told Susan it was a bad call, and she said if he did not do it, she would recommend the board switch vendors. I ask him if he will testify at a board meeting, and he says yes, but only if I can guarantee he would not lose the contract. I tell him I cannot guarantee anything, but if we expose the scam, the board might be forced to make changes. If you are enjoying this HOA revenge story, hit the like button and subscribe for more tales of paper trails that destroy petty tyrants. The twist lands 2 weeks later when I get a letter from my homeowner insurance carrier saying they received multiple complaints about harassment and disruptive behavior at my address, and they are reviewing my policy for potential cancellation. I call the carrier and ask who filed the complaints, and they say the complaints came from the HOA itself as part of a routine community safety audit. I tell them the complaints are fabricated. This is retaliation, and I have documentation proving it. The rep says they cannot ignore complaints from an HOA, and unless I can prove the claims are false, they have to proceed with the review. I ask for copies of the complaints, and she says she will send them within 10 days. When the complaints arrive, they are all signed by Susan Kelly, and they reference incidents I was not even home for. One claims I hosted a loud party on a Tuesday night when I was working a double shift, and I have hospital badge swipes to prove it. Another says I verbally threatened a neighbor in the parking lot, but the neighbor named in the complaint moved out 4 months ago. I pull my work schedule, my badge logs, and my dash cam footage, and I build a timeline that proves every single claim is false. Then I email the whole packet to my insurance carrier with a cover letter that says if they cancel my policy based on fraudulent complaints, I will file a lawsuit for bad faith and name the HOA as a co-defendant. The review gets put on hold. Susan escalates again by trying to switch the argument to noise and attitude instead of parking. She sends an email to the entire HOA group chat saying I have been uncooperative and disrespectful to staff, and the board is considering a formal hearing for conduct violations. I reply to the thread with screenshots of the false insurance complaints and the timeline proving I was not home during the alleged incidents. I say if the board wants a hearing, I am ready, and I will bring witnesses, recordings, and a lawyer. The thread goes quiet for a day. Then someone else posts that they were also hit with fake noise complaints after pushing back on a towing fee, and suddenly 6 other people chime in with similar stories. The board schedules an emergency meeting and sends a notice saying it will be held on a Thursday night at 7 in the community clubhouse. I show up early with my folder of evidence, my attorney on speed dial, and the tow driver waiting in the parking lot as a backup witness. The room fills up with about 30 residents, most of them holding their own folders and looking angry. Susan is sitting at the front table with the board president and the property manager, and she has her handheld scanner sitting in front of her like a gavel. The board president opens the meeting by saying the purpose is to address concerns about parking enforcement and compliance procedures. Susan immediately jumps in and says the HOA has a duty to maintain property values, and lax enforcement leads to chaos. Someone in the back shouts that charging $300 to remove a tire clamp is not enforcement, it is extortion. Another person says their guest was towed during a medical emergency, and the tow driver refused to release the car without cash payment. The room erupts. I wait for a break in the shouting and I stand up. I say I have documentation proving that Susan has been filing false complaints, coordinating targeted enforcement, and manipulating the towing contract to generate fees. I hold up the group chat screenshots and the timeline. Susan says those are private communications and I had no right to save them. I say they were posted in a shared chat with 60 members. There is no expectation of privacy, and if she wants to argue about it, she can do it in front of a judge. The board president tries to cut me off, but I say I am not done. I pull out my phone and I say I have something else. Something I have been holding back because timing is the whole weapon. I acted like I was backing down because I wanted Susan to think she was winning. I play an audio clip from 3 weeks ago. It is a recording of Susan talking to another board member in the parking lot, and she is saying she wants to make an example of me because I disrespected her last year by telling her the ambulance noise complaint was ridiculous. She says she is going to bury me in notices until I run out of printer ink, and if I fight back, she will make sure my insurance gets canceled and my refinance falls through. The room goes dead silent. The board president stares at Susan. Susan's face goes white, then red, and she says the recording is illegal and I cannot use it. I say Vermont is a one-party consent state. I was part of the conversation, and the recording is perfectly legal. I also say I emailed the proof to every homeowner in the subdivision 2 hours ago, so everyone already knows what she said. The property manager stands up and says the board needs to go into executive session. I say there is no need, because I am not asking for an apology. I am asking for an independent audit of all parking fines, tow authorizations, and late fees from the last year. I say if the audit finds improper charges, the HOA needs to refund every resident who is overcharged, and Susan needs to be removed from any enforcement role. The board president says that is not how it works, and I say then I will file a complaint with the State Consumer Protection Office and CC every local news outlet. Someone else in the crowd says they will join the complaint. Then another person, then 10 more. Susan tries to grab her scanner and her clipboard and leave, but the board president tells her to sit down. The meeting goes for another 90 minutes, and by the end the board votes to hire an independent auditor and suspend all parking enforcement pending the results. Susan is placed on administrative leave. I walk out feeling like I just survived a cage match, but I know the real fight is still coming. The audit takes 6 weeks. The auditor is a retired accountant who used to work for a municipal government, and she does not mess around. She requests every tow authorization, every fee ledger, every board email, and every complaint file. She interviews residents, the tow driver, and the property manager. When the report comes out, it is 40 pages long, and the summary says the HOA improperly assessed over $18,000 in late fees and towing charges in the last 12 months, many of them tied to violations that were either fabricated or based on rules that were never officially adopted. The report specifically calls out Susan for using her access to resident information to target individuals who challenged her authority, and it recommends full refunds plus policy reforms. The board schedules a second meeting to present the findings. This time the room is even more packed, and there are 2 local reporters in the back with cameras. The board president reads a prepared statement saying the board accepts the auditor's findings and will issue refunds to all affected residents within 60 days. He also says Susan Kelly has resigned from her role as Neighborhood Watch Liaison effective immediately. Susan is not at the meeting, but I hear later that she moved out of the subdivision 2 weeks after the audit dropped. The refunds start going out in batches. I get a check for $420, which covers the bogus administrative fee, the gate suspension fee I did not even know I was charged, and a portion of the tow authorization that was later reversed. Other residents get checks for $600, $800, even $1,000. The tow driver tells me the HOA switched to a new vendor with a stricter contract that requires photo evidence before any tow, and the call volume has dropped to almost zero. 3 months later, I close on my refinance without any issues. The lien search comes back clean, my insurance is active, and the title company does not even blink. I get a message from the property manager saying the board implemented new rules requiring all enforcement actions to be logged in a public database with photos and timestamps, and any resident can request a review within 10 business days. It is not perfect, but it is a massive improvement. The funny karma moment comes during a routine board election 6 months later. Someone nominates Susan's favorite fee, a $25 quarterly parking decal renewal charge, for a budget review. The auditor digs into the ledger and discovers the fee was never actually approved by a board vote. It was just something Susan invented and started collecting 3 years ago. The HOA attorney forces a reversal to reduce liability, and the board has to refund another $12,000 across the entire neighborhood. The vote to eliminate the fee passes unanimously, and the meeting minutes include a note that the fee was improperly assessed and the responsible party is no longer affiliated with the HOA. I run into the tow driver a few months later at a coffee shop, and he thanks me for standing up to the HOA. He says his business is better now because he is not wasting time on garbage calls, and he actually enjoys the work again. I tell him he was the one who helped me build the case, and he says he just did not want to be part of a scam anymore. The final showdown happens at the gas station lot at the edge of the subdivision about 8 months after the first meeting. Susan shows up out of nowhere while I am filling my tank, and she walks up with her phone out recording. She says I ruined her reputation and cost her thousands of dollars in legal fees, and she wants me to know she is filing a defamation lawsuit. I look straight at her phone, and I say every word I said about her was backed by evidence, and if she wants to put that evidence in front of a jury, I am happy to oblige. I also say the recording I played at the meeting is still on my phone, and I have 3 backup copies in cloud storage, so good luck trying to make it disappear. She stares at me for a long time, then she gets in her car and drives away. I never hear from her again. The HOA is not perfect now, but it is 1,000 times better than it was under Susan's watch. The new compliance officer is a retired teacher who actually reads the rules before enforcing them, and the board holds quarterly town halls where residents can ask questions without getting shouted down. The parking lot is not a war zone anymore, and I have not seen a tire clamp in over a year. The property manager sends me a message a year later saying the board wants to recognize residents who helped improve the community, and they are putting together a thank you event. I decline politely and say I just wanted to park my car without getting extorted, and I am glad it worked out. She says the board understands, and if I ever have concerns in the future, they will take them seriously. I still work nights, I still park in the guest lot when my assigned spot is full, and I still keep my dash cam running. The difference is, I do not wake up every morning wondering if my car is going to be hooked up to a tow truck, and I do not get ambushed by a handheld scanner every time I walk to my mailbox. The neighborhood is quieter, the enforcement is fair, and the HOA actually does what it is supposed to do, instead of shaking down residents for fake violations. The last time I saw Susan's name was in the HOA newsletter about 18 months after the audit. It was buried in a legal notice section that said the association settled a dispute with a former liaison regarding improper fee collection, and the settlement included a mutual non-disclosure agreement. I do not know what she had to pay, and I do not care. The important part is the HOA learned that enforcement is not the same as harassment, and residents have rights even when a power-hungry board member decides to go rogue. I refinanced again last year, and the process was smooth. No liens, no complaints, no surprise fees. I got a letter from the title company saying my property is in good standing, and the HOA is up to date on all filings. It felt like the end of a long nightmare, except I know it was not a nightmare. It was a real fight that took evidence, timing, and a willingness to call out the people who think rules are just weapons to use against anyone who questions them. The HOA still exists, the rules still exist, and the parking lot still has lines and guest spots and fire lanes. But now when someone calls for a tow, there is a process, there is accountability, and there is a public record. The handheld scanners are gone, the tire clamps are gone, and the predatory vendor is gone. The neighborhood is not perfect, but it is livable, and that is all I ever wanted. I keep the audio clip on my phone as a reminder that the truth always matters more than someone's version of the truth, and the only way to beat a bully is to take away the tools they use to bully you. Susan had the scanner, the authorization slips, the compliance office, and the board backing her up. I had timestamps, screenshots, and a recording of her saying the quiet part out loud. In the end, the paper trail won, and the HOA had to choose between protecting a rogue enforcer and protecting the community. They chose the community, and that is how it should be. The tow driver still sends me a text every few months saying business is good, and he appreciates what I did. The property manager still replies to my emails within 24 hours. The board still holds town halls, and people still complain about noise and parking and landscaping. But now the complaints get handled like normal disputes, instead of excuses to extract fees and punish residents for existing. I learned that HOAs are not inherently evil, but they attract people who want power without accountability, and those people will abuse the system until someone forces them to stop. I also learned that holding back the trump card until the right moment is the difference between losing a fight and winning a war. If I had played the recording early, Susan would have had time to spin it, deny it, or claim it was taken out of context. By waiting until the public meeting moment where the minutes turn against Karen, I made sure she had no escape route and no way to control the narrative. The subdivision is still called Aspen Hollow. The HOA is still called the Aspen Hollow Parking Compliance Association, and the parking rules are still printed on a laminated card that every resident gets when they move in. The difference is the rules are actually followed now, and the people enforcing them are not using enforcement as a cover for personal vendettas. That is all I ever asked for, and it only took a year of my life, $420 in bogus fees, and one perfectly timed audio clip to make it happen. Thanks for watching, and I appreciate you being here.